I can't remember just how long it's been since we've gotten an episode that focused so exclusively on Rainbow Dash with minimal contributions from all the other characters. In fact, this episode probably has the most dialogue and screen time for Rainbow Dash in the entire series. Even more so that she finally has a song that's all her own. But how well can Rainbow hold up a story without much support from the rest of the cast? Let's take a look-see. With the return of winter, we get a little more world building through some Season 1 continuity. Turns out that Fall Weather Friends really was supposed to come before winter wrap-up. And for all this time, I kept seeing all sorts of theories and headcanons that were trying to explain how fall was supposed to come after winter in Equestria. Though it only lasts a few seconds, I'm always glad to see that the writers are paying close attention to consistency in this world. With Tank getting slower and slower, and Rainbow Dash becoming all the more stubborn against the facts staring her right in the face, we get to see all sorts of shenanigans on how she attempts to stop winter from coming. Even to the point where she knows that she's doing wrong, but wants to keep going anyways. We even get a whole song about it, called I'll Fly. I will say that this is a great example of Ashley Ball's talents, and quite frankly, I hope that we get to hear even more songs that make her the main focus in future episodes. The tone is probably more what you'd hear from Rainbow Rocks than an episode of MLB, but this is Rainbow Dash we're talking about here, and we already know that she prefers this kind of musical style. For me, I don't believe it's a song that I'll keep coming back to, and if I'm looking for really good music that features Ashley Ball, I think Applejack's Lullaby from last week's episode is more enjoyable overall. But I'm sure that this piece is going to get a lot of playtime in the fandom, and I can already imagine that dozens of musicians are going to remix this tune in the coming weeks. The comedy here was hit and miss. Given the past episodes in Season 5, I think this episode is the weakest thus far, at least as far as the laughs go. This is not to say that I didn't find any of the jokes worthwhile. Some of the expressions here are really enjoyable, even when Rainbow decides to stop winter. You're a mean one, Rainbow Dash. Seriously, the writers could have done so much with a parody of The Grinch Who Stole Christmas in this episode, especially with all the sabotage that's going on. Instead, we get a lot of fairly predictable plot elements, where none of Rainbow Dash's attempts are successful, and even a few of them blow up in her face. At first glance, we might think that Rainbow is taking things way too far, that her stubbornness really isn't warranted just because she wants to go sledding with Tank during the winter months. But if you take a deeper look into this episode, there's actually a lot more going on here than meets the eye. While the story is focused on Rainbow accepting the fact that Tank will be out of her life for the next few months, and a lot of her shenanigans with trying to stop reality from changing the status quo, I think this might be a rather clever representation for accepting the death of a loved one. Think about that for a moment. If we were to replace the phrase "going to be hibernating" with the phrase "going to die," this episode suddenly has a great deal more depth to it, and we can better understand why the writers made Rainbow have such an extreme reaction to these circumstances. She's going through the 5 stages of grief. At first, she denies that anything is wrong with Tank to begin with, and when others even mention the word hibernating, Rainbow immediately became angry with them. Then she moves on to the bargaining stage, where she believes that she can change the circumstances that would take Tank away from her. And when none of her efforts can make that change, Rainbow closes herself off from the world and becomes depressed. And finally, when she allows her feelings of despair to surface, she reaches the stage of acceptance. Even among her friends, we get to see a worthwhile response to Rainbow's depression. I actually think that Fluttershy's methods here, as painful as they might be, can be the right course of action. Helping someone else to face their harsh reality head on, even if that might mean that they will have to give in to their despair for a time, can actually help. And if that means you need to spend some time crying along with them to better show you understand your friend's pain, that can actually help as well. When we see Rainbow is finally willing to accept her circumstances, then she is able to move on. And if that's not enough to show that the writers wanted to tell a story about accepting the death of a loved one, the final scene shows Rainbow burying her pet in the earth. I know that on the surface, this story is about a tortoise needing to hibernate. But perhaps with a second look, you can see just how clever this tale actually is. Honestly, I am impressed that the writers found a way to teach about dealing with the loss of a loved one without any character or pet actually dying. Bravo, Cindy Morrow! Glad to have you back on the writing staff for another season. While I admit that much of this episode may seem predictable without a lot of comedy to keep our interest, this kind of episode is far more effective as a teaching tool for those who are in despair, for both children and adults. Though it probably would have been at least a little helpful to show that Rainbow was at least trying to repair all the damage she caused. But now I would like to hear from each of you. What was your impression of Thanks for the Memories? Are you a fan of Ashley Ball's singing talents? What was your favorite standout moment from the episode? Do you agree that this story is reflecting the 5 stages of grief on accepting the loss of a loved one? I would like to hear your thoughts on Thanks for the Memories. And while not every episode of MLP will be the most entertaining, I can truly appreciate the stories that make me think. I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.